And there was something as we were I was helping him a little bit put this program together, though. He put this program together, quite computer literate, and had no problem putting this program together. He didn't need much of my help with it. But the weather outside has something to do with something that we had in common. And as we were looking at one of his aerial photographs, I noticed some ponds. And we started talking about those ponds, and he said that he skated on those ponds. And I said, "Ah, you're a skater." He goes, "Yes." I said, "Well, I'm a skater too." And he says he plowed off those ponds to skate. He plowed them off with a Gravely, an old L. I'm sure there's somebody in here who knows what an old L Gravely is. And I used to plow off ponds with an old L so we could skate on them. And he flooded those ponds to put on nice ice. And so it's weather like that you flood your pond with so you have nice ice to skate on. So here's our speaker this evening, and should be, I'll try to get our picture up here.
How we're going to work this out? How do I,
That speaker, that mic works too there.
do I wave at you when I want to change a slide? Randy?
Just tell me when you want to move. Move you want.
Can everybody hear my booming voice?
I'm not getting one.
There was a fellow, Joseph Campbell, who was a student, professor of world religions and everything. He had this thing with Bill Moyers where they were talking about things, and he said, "Well, I did this on my computer." And Bill Moyers says, "Oh, a student of world religions and things, I'm interested in what you have to think about computers." And he said, "Well, Bill, they're very much like the Old Testament. Lots of rules and no mercy." That's sort of what we're doing here. Is this going to work?
I think we're all set.
Okay, that's where we're located, in a special part of the state. There's not too much agriculture going on in the capital area, but I tell people when I'm in different settings, different places, who can name a place that you can live where you can have breakfast in the morning and have lunch in cities as diverse as New York City, Boston, and Montreal? And that's the little space that we're in there. That there's a lot of things you can do. You can choose a place to live, but you can go to very interesting places from there. Next. Now, I put this in because of the history of things. I thought we were at our 99th year last year as a farm, but it turns out I did some research and we're still at our 99th year as a farm. But however, I guarantee you that next year I have the paperwork that shows that. But my family goes back a ways. My name is Peter, and my middle name is Gansvoort, Gansevore, RT. How's that for a Dutch name? It's a very impressive middle name to have, Gansvoort, until you translate it, and it means goose crossing. And so, anyway, the family ended up the Gansvoort family ended up in this place, which was built by the British during prior to the French and Indian War. And the Gansvoort family moved in there, and Leonard Gansvoort and his wife had a young lady who married a Jacob Teneyck, who was a local guy, and the property became part of the family, and it was a couple thousand acres, and it was a lot of farming went on there, and I haven't been able to find out a lot about that. But it's all part of the city of Albany now. There isn't a place that doesn't have a house on it or some other kind of thing. There's no farming goes on in that area at all. And my granddad was the last person born at Whitehall before it burned down. And so he did a little growing up, and then he got about the business of trying to move on. You can see here that Leonard Gansford's daughter, Hester Gansford Teneyck, she did this sampler in 1810 at the death of her grandfather. And so that's a piece of a family history. And then their daughter, Hester Gansford Teneyck, went and married another Teneyck. So that's why I talk a little funny sometimes. But anyway, it was an all Teneyck thing there for about 100 years, and in the late 1800s it burned down, and my grandfather started out his own life. I think we're ready to go to another picture here. And he looked for a place to buy a farm, and he chose this place. Those are the Helderberg Mountains in the background. There's a state park up there, which just celebrated its 100th anniversary. And if you ever go to Thatcher Park and look down over the side there, you can look down at Indian Ladder Farms. And that cliff was a cliff that the Mohawk Indians, who were trading in Albany, and then they had lodges and things in the Schoharie Valley, they had to cross that cliff. And in doing that, they created a ladder. It started out, this is oral history of a tree felled against the side of the cliff, and using it as handholds to get to the top, and then later a more formal ladder was put up. And so that's why we're named Indian Ladder Farms, because that was a point of transition from the Hudson Valley to the Schoharie Valley by the Mohawk Indians. And the trees are there. Now there's a picture of my granddad, and he's a pretty special guy. I'm named after him. I'm Peter Gansford Teneyck II, and he was a little wayward. He went to RPI and became an engineer instead of going to Cornell. And he did a lot of different kinds of things, but farming was always something that he wanted to do a lot. He had a couple things, and this is a little digression to this, and I've got to watch my time here. One of the things that he felt was that Albany ought to be a deep water port, that ships in the world ought to be able to come to Albany, New York, in order to trade. And so he made that one of the main things that he did with his life. And he actually got elected to Congress and went to Washington and got the bill passed, but no money. And then the next time around, he got the money. And they dug a 27-foot ditch from New York City to Albany in the Hudson River, so that Albany, New York could then have access to over 80% of all the ships of the world could sail across the Atlantic and come all the way to Albany, New York. And while that finally got passed and got done, he was being applauded for sticking to it. They called him Periscope Pete, was one of the nicknames he had for pushing that agenda. At the same time that he was doing that, we were milking Guernsey cattle at Indian Ladder Farms. So you have two agendas in your life, and that was one. Let's go on to the next thing. Now, I love these barns. I thought they're very nostalgic. I thought that they were wonderful and creative and offered a lot of individual expression and about a way to farm until I met Randy. And he informed me that these are Sears Roebuck kits. That took all the romance out of the whole thing. I took a big step down talking to him about barns when he was down there. Next picture, please. Now, this was the game. Golden Guernseys. All the people in the world that went for quantity rather than quality eventually won out. But when I was growing up, this was the cow and the high butterfat content and all kinds of other things, and that's what we did. And you talk about choosing the wrong side. That's the direction that he went in, and I understand now there's not too many Guernseys left around the world, or perhaps I don't know too much about that stuff. Next slide, please. Now, at the same time, we were also in the fruit business. And this is another building on the farm, a Sears Roebuck kit, so I understand, that my grandfather built, and here's where we stored apples. And in the top, all the apple boxes were stored, and we packed apples there. And the farm actually ended up being a consolidation of 5 separate properties. And out of respect for the people that farmed there for a lot of years before this happened, it's Indian Ladder Farms with an S on it, to respect the individual owners of the farms that were originally there. And one of the interesting things, I think that's the main highway, Route 156, runs from left to right there. And I notice the roads go right across the highway, so if you're driving between Forestville and Alamo, you better watch out for the sprayer. Next slide, please. Here's some of our original high-tech things that we had on the farm. I found this slide. I don't know what they're doing or the names of the horses, although when I was a little kid, we still had working animals on the farm that actually went to work every morning. And I had that experience. I also had the experience of the dairy cattle on the farm up until the barn burned in 1948. And so my really early years, I just remember the cows and didn't really have any role with anything because I was just a little guy. But I just had a great impression. They made such an impression on me as a person. Next slide. Then we got some modern machinery. Who knows what that is and what year that was? Anybody here think back to that?
Is that an Indiana truck?
It's a Federal,
Federal.
but I want to know what year it is, and I don't know the answer to that. So will somebody make something up for me? 1910. Well, we started the farm in 1915, and I'm saying it's a 1915 truck. Just because if it could be as early as that. Anyway, that's a seriously old vehicle. Straight chain drive to the rear. a lot of simplicity. Next picture. Now that's my dad and my mother, and he was a Cornell graduate, and he was the next generation doing things, and he got really interested in apples and also in Hereford beef cattle. So while I was in high school, we ran white-faced Herefords, and then I had a chance to do some working then, and so when I think back to that era, I think, you know, how many of you guys have used a lacerator? Well, that's a kinder and gentler way to castrate a young calf, and then dehorning them and things like that. Other things that I took for granted that I don't think I'd go back and do anymore. But anyway, so beef cattle were growing up, and apples was the endeavor. Next slide, please. Then we started to work on that building a little bit there, and I see there's an addition poked off from the side facing towards us now, and that was a packing facility where we packed apples. The apples that grew my grandfather used to say that the cold air that came off the top of the Helderberg Mountains and washed down over the orchards kept the orchards cooler, and we had a later bloom time than other farms did, and so we were able to avoid a lot of frosts that other people had. I don't know if there's any truth to it or not, but I kind of like the idea of it. And there were a lot of people grew apples along the edge of that cliff there, and Helderberg apples packed in barrels were taken and sold in New York City under that name as a Helderberg apple. It was supposed to be an extra special apple. Next picture, please. So when I was in high school, my father got my best friend and I together with the idea of, we'll sell apples on the front porch. Maybe we can do some retail business. We were out in the country, so there wasn't really a lot of people around, and so we had two sizes, bushels and half bushels. And on a Sunday afternoon, so he paid us 10% of whatever our sales were. So we were on a Sunday afternoon, we're knocking down $10 or $12 for an afternoon's work. And my father took me in and he said that he was firing me. Hiring somebody else who was going to be hired to run that part of the farm, and that I could go back and work for my 75 cents an hour if I wanted to. And I was really upset, and he said, I'm not going to explain it to you because you won't understand. It's too much money. He said, it's too much money. And that's the way we went with that boy here. And here's our retail operation here, run by someone else. And then we proceed forward to the next picture. Now, this is taken, you can't of course see, but it's inside our retail market now. It's where we have a baked goods counter, but we packed our apples in there and sold them in Eastern Standard boxes, bushel and an eighth. You put a couple of slats in a cardboard over the top, and then they'd go on their side, and they'd be put into a truck and move down the line. Next slide, please. All apples in apple boxes. Nobody does that anymore. All cider in barrels, and those are very rich times, and I get nostalgic thinking about that's close to being the way things ought to be. No saran wrap, no styrofoam, no nothing.
What year are we at here?
We're in the 50s somewhere, and we were one of the four growers of hiring really high quality labor with farm wages. So next slide, please. So you think you've hired some poor people in the past. Nowadays, to show you that we were one of the first innovators of being able to get things done in a very powerful way. Next slide, please. So I built this building on the back of, we're like 1972 or 3 or something like that now, to have a new pack house, because the pack house you saw in the previous pictures, we're turning that into a retail operation, and we got to have a new packing facility where we can get in and out of there. And I put these big double T things, you know, where you put the reinforced rebar down through the center of it under tension, so they got a little bit of an arc to them. So I could do that whole building without any posts of any type in there. So that just a clean shot all around there. So that's a big step ahead. Next slide, please. Then you start getting fancy with the things you grow, and you start having high-tech things. We put in these high tunnels that have plastic over them. They don't now, but you can see it's all furrowed up there, so that we can grow things where you have a little bit better chance to not have disease, and you have a little bit of control. Come down front here, sir. You were here last year. You don't get to be in the back of the room. There's a couple of seats right down here, George.
Hey, George.
I still remember George showing where he carried everything around in station wagons. You get more work done with those than you could with a pickup truck. So the lumber sticking out of the back. So anyway, here we're raising strawberries under these high tunnels, and they're up on things. These are old irrigation pipes that came out of a greenhouse in Holland, and the idea is that we can switch those trays out. We can have June strawberries in there. We take them out, put them on pallets, and grow them outside, and we stick another group of things in there that are the fall-bearing strawberries, so you can have strawberries in September. And so we went down that road, and it turns out that, well, the plastic is up on that, isn't it? I didn't notice. And it turns out that That's a tough game to play because the landlord, meaning the cost of that structure and the plastic on it and everything, that has a very high rent. So you got to have a lot of production to be able to afford to do that, and that didn't turn out to be successful. Next picture, please. And then in the laying beds now with the new way and strawberries in the beds, that turned out to be a pretty good thing. Except we're not really great strawberry growers. We're really get grumpy about using a lot of pesticides and tarnished plant bug and some diseases. You're spraying so close to when people are trying to pick strawberries that even though it's legal to do, I just really got uncomfortable about doing that. And so we're kind of getting out of the strawberry game until we can find a way to grow strawberries without putting pesticides on them close to when they're harvested. Next slide, please. Strawberries, and the next one, raspberries. We also grow a couple acres of raspberries. Again, the idea is how can we come up with another crop that's close, that's going to give us another season, so everything's not just the fall. We can have something going in May and June, in July, and then have something in the fall to be able to spread our risk over the 2 seasons. So that's the direction we're still working on now, and it's reasonably successful. Next slide, please. Then we got into the cider business. Value added, right, John? And the idea was that you could take apples and make apple cider. In this press here, the year that press was made over in Conway, Massachusetts, there were only 6 presses made. And it's the old Palmer press style, and we're still doing it. We put some stainless steel linings on things so that we have a little bit better control. I got to watch my time here because this is a time that we would be talking about food safety. The HACCP control program that we have to be able to prove that we can grow disease-free apple cider is unbelievable. The program, page-wise, is more than 100 pages. And when the FDA comes here to inspect this thing, they take at least a half a day to inspect all the various ways that we can grow apples and make a product out of them and be able to have a 99.999% reduction in the pathogens that are prevalent in apple cider. And it requires a whole nother skill set of doing things. I suppose the same thing is true in dairy, but I'm not too familiar with it. Next slide, please. Here are the master pressmen at our place. These 2 guys have been making cider now probably close to 18 years, I would say. And they take great pride in what they're doing. And one is a regular one of my employees, and the other one is a Jamaican gentleman that comes up every year. And they do a great job, and we make a big deal out of it, and they put a lot of input into the right blend of apples and trying to do things in a way that we can maintain without any proof at all that it's a superior product. Next slide, please. Now, of course, somebody has to eat the profits, and so Matt Pelletier is drinking some of the beverage that he made. He's the only cider maker that I know of in the state that has a singing band group that has more than 2 CDs out on the market right now, so that's what he does in his spare time. Next slide, please.
Question for you, Peter.
Yes.
Are you pasteurizing cider here? Or?
Well, the word pasteurization has changed now. It used to be a dairy term, and it represented a certain duration of time at a certain temperature. And that was the only legal way to do it, but that turned out to be really hard on cider. It would scald the product. So they came down with the pasteurization now for cider is a lower temperature for a shorter period of time, and also now includes ultraviolet light. So I have a machine that the cider's pumped up into. There's 4 ultraviolet lights in the center. There is a crystal globe or cylinder around that, and the cider is put out into a very thin film as it flows by the sides of this cylinder. And the ultraviolet light shines through that thin film of cider to a sensor on the other side, which drives the motor. So if the cider is cloudy, the motor goes slower and it spends more time exposed to ultraviolet light. And if it's a thinner thing, then it runs faster, and if it isn't getting enough exposure to get you that 99.999% log reduction, then the machine won't run at all. And so that's our safety feature to be able to know that we're getting the job done.
What was your production of cider this year? How much?
3 gallons.
I mean, no wonder you're struggling.
Well, we pressed a lot of cider this year because there's a bigger demand for people who want to make hard cider. So we're now pressing all these apples, and we don't have enough of our own. We're buying some others, so it's a number of tens of thousands of gallons we're trying to get through this little machine here. And I'm getting a little uncomfortable because my life's work has been about having healthy, nutritious food to be able to give people to make them feel well. And now we're in the business of making the devil's nectar. So I'm a little uncomfortable about that.
Well, they're still feeling well.
Yeah. Next slide, please. Well, now a little bit about the orchard side of the thing. You know, we're not a big farm, and so we don't have advantages of certain types of mechanization, but this is the way we plant apple trees. This thing digs a trench, and somebody hands him an apple tree, and he puts it in the ground, and when that white stick comes to the edge of that tree, it's time to put another one in the ground, and you keep going along, and then we have to stomp them in around and do all this high-tech stuff. Now, next slide, please. So this is sort of the way orchards, so we're a generation past this one now. But basically what I wanted to tell you was that the orchards on the farm, when you originally saw them, the trees were planted, let me see, just make sure I get my figures right here, if I can let me fumble for just a moment here. That's the original orchards on the farm were planted 40 by 40, and then we planted trees 20 feet in 40-foot rows. And that gives you 54 trees to the acre. And the orchards that we've been planting the last couple of years, and we'll be putting in a bunch of thousands of trees this year, are planted in 12-foot rows, and the trees are 3 feet apart. That's putting 18 trees where one tree used to stand. And I don't know how that's going to work out, but anyway, that's the way people are going now, and as Paul knows, a number of people are planting at much higher densities than that. I'm afraid of getting trunk rub. Get down under 3 feet, you know, and they start to grow, there's going to be an issue. And the idea is that we're in the business, watching my time here now, we're in the business of light interception per acre. What percentage of the sunlight that falls on the surface of the ground can we get and put on a leaf, which is a factory that's going to turn it into a photosynthetic product that we can turn into an apple that we can sell to somebody. And so the mechanics of that light interception, over 70% now of the sunlight can be captured under these new systems. And when these trees try to grow up, you want them to be as tall as they can. You're getting up there 10, 11 feet. As soon as you can, they get up in the air, and then they start whipping back and forth in the wind, and they say, oh geez, I'm getting a little wobbly here. I'm going to invest most of my work in making myself thicker so I'll be stronger. So we fool it by adding a pole or adding some wires to it to make it think it's thicker than it is, so it'll keep on growing up. And so that's how we're getting these orchards up and going in a very short period of time. Next slide, please. There's some beautiful things about growing apples that we have a chance to do that in some ways is very nice. And apple blossoms they're beautiful to look at, but it's such an important time of the year for us because, as we all know, if you take the seeds out of a McIntosh apple and you plant them, you don't get a McIntosh apple tree, right? Oh, now you get the birds and the bees, that the apple, if a pollen grain comes, they have both male and female parts, and if the male part starts growing down the style to go down to start fertilization, the tree recognizes it's its own genetic material and it cuts it off and doesn't allow it to happen. It'll only allow a pollen grain that came from another variety of apple to go down and complete the process of fertilization. And so the analogy that a mother is to a daughter like an apple tree is to an apple is wrong. The apple is the same genetic material as the mother. It's the uterus or the womb and the seeds of the offspring of the tree. And that process goes on, and we have to try to keep the crop to a reasonable size so that we don't overproduce, because if the trees produce too many apples, these factories are producing photosynthetic product. They want to extend shoots, they want to make leaves, they want to increase trunk girth, they want to grow roots, and they want to grow apple blossoms for the next year. And if there's too many things to do and there's not enough food to go around, they don't make the apple blossoms for the next year. So if you have a big crop this year, you're going to have a very small crop next year. And by the same token, if you have very few apples in a given year, the backyard apple tree that doesn't have any apples on it, you're going to have a hell of a lot of apples the next year. So we have to moderate that process so that we can have an even number of fruit that the tree can carry to term. Next picture, please. So this is the product of apples that we're trying to do. Next picture. And here we retired our development rights on the farm. That's my daughter and myself and former Governor Pataki and former Senator Nancy Lorraine Hoffman from this area, I believe. And it wasn't financially a great thing to do, but now that it's been 10 years, we look back on it and we're satisfied that nobody can ever build another house or run another business at Indian Ladder Farms except farming. And the obligation for us to continue to farm with those restrictions, if anyone buys the property, anything, that covenant goes on the deed so that it carries forward. They can't subdivide and they can't do anything. So the pressure's on us to be able to stay in business. And that's what we're trying to do. Next picture, please. This is why we're doing it. There's the mountain. And those are apples on the right. And that's kind of what we're all about. Next picture. This is sort of the way things look now, today, except that all the trees you see there are gone and other things are planted because it's a few years ago. But that building there was a horse barn on the farm that I moved down there to be part of the complex of buildings we have there. And I interviewed a guy about moving it down there, and he says, boy, he says, that's a big building, that's so many feet. He says, it doesn't even look like a kid. No, he didn't say that. But he said, I'm going to have this equipment and that equipment. I said, now look, I said, before you get telling me how hard of a job it is, where it is now is not its original location. My grandfather moved it across the road with horses to where it is now. So, you know, let's find an easier way to get that building down there. And so we built several additions and things of this type. And good, next slide, please. Kind of lost track of where I am. Okay, so we're in the retail business as much as we can be. I've tried to, over the years, to be able to sell apples to people like Walmart's, and I'm not smart enough. They beat me in straight sets. They always got some game going, some kind of way where I come out of the thing a loser. But if I am able to sell an apple to any one of you people, the biggest box store in the world can't bring any value to that transaction. They can't offer a better quality, and they can't offer a lower price. So it's the only place I have any traction. So we have to be selling people apples, and they buy a lot of apples. We have to be in the entertainment business too. Next slide, Randy. We also do a lot of educational classes. This is one now that Cecilia is doing with kids. We also do things with bees and wool, and we have a farm school, and during the summer where kids come for a half a day and take care of animals and clean out, you know, kids say, my dad pays me you money here for me to clean out a pen? Yeah, you got it. So where that goes. So we do educational things. Next slide, please. We do other kinds of games going on. If you look there closely, you'll see a rather tall individual there on the payroll with showing people a good time. Next slide. We do birthday parties. Chickens and birthday cake go, pretty well together. They love it. Everybody loves it. And the idea is with all your employees, if you're not having a good time, you're not doing a good job on the farm. Next slide, please. There's that truck. It's still here that we saw in one of the first slides. And it's still around. And it's I keep it because it's about the only thing older than I am. Next slide, please. There's a new tractor that we've got with one of my people that works closely with me and my granddaughter Taylor, who's a junior at RPI in their management program. I don't think I'm going to see her back on the farm, but she works there. And but that's one of those narrow profile tractors. It's it's only like 58 inches, 59 inches wide. And I thought I couldn't afford a whole tractor because they're just too expensive. So I think about 2/3 of a tractor, you get a better deal that way. Next slide, please. Typical employees on the farm. That's the person that runs the kitchen, and that's one of my H2A workers on the clock, of course, I'm sure. Next picture, please. And another Jamaican having a good time. Doing something profitable for us, I'm sure. Next picture. And Halloween, people dress up, and there's one of the people working in the kitchen. Next slide, please. And there is Tim, the boss, bossing people around. Another guy that's been with us for a lot of years. Next picture. And of course, the usual recreation that we have during off hours. Next picture. All right, now we're at the end, and here's the new generation. My daughter and my son are trying to move into it. They both have jobs. They don't seem like they're going to be able to quit right away, but somehow they're going to have to carry on. And my son-in-law is now getting us into the hops, and he's putting in hop poles here. I noticed that he travels in a rather wide circle of people, and I noticed that the two people that are down there, one of them is putting dirt in the hole, and another one is tamping it in. One's an attorney and the other one's a bank president. I don't know how he gets those kind of people. They love the idea of having something like this going on, and so he just bought a huge hop harvester. How many tens of thousands of dollars, I don't know. So, I mean, he's in a very serious situation here as we get down the road for the devil's nectar. Here's an aerial shot of the farm, and I'll just hold that on the screen. That's who we are, and it's a good summation of our agenda is, some of you heard me say this before, that we have to stop sliding down the slippery slope of feeding ourselves as Americans by waving money in the air and hoping somebody comes from one of the four corners of the world to give us something to eat. We have to grow some of our own food in the fabric of our own communities. It's all right for t-shirts and teacups to come from China, but we better be about the business of growing some of our own food just in case. And so that's our 99 years. I was hoping it'd be 100 years, but it isn't. But that's where we're at now, and if anybody's got any questions or contributions here, let's hear them. Yes.
I just have a quick question about, you guys seem to be very oriented in the retail side. How far in advance do you have to know what kind of varieties are going to be popular and what consumers want to buy, especially with new varieties like Snapdragon and Ruby Frost?
Yeah. I'm part of the group that's planting the Snapdragon. People ask how long does an apple tree live? And I tell them it has 2 lives. It has a botanical life and it has an economic life. And I've yet to have a tree last for its botanical life. It can live a long time, but the varieties go out of favor. People don't like them anymore. Now we're in this instant gratification society where people want to see something new. Just regardless, they just want to see something they haven't seen before and have something. So there's terrible dynamics going on out there that I don't know what, because for me to plant a tree is such a big commitment over so many years. Well, I'll find out whether the snapdragon's going to be something that's going to catch on, or am I going to lose. Right now it looks like the chain stores have decided they're going to go with the new varieties, and then the McCowan and the McIntosh and the John of Gold and the Cortland are going to go, and nobody's going to buy them anymore. I think that's a serious mistake, that you will always be able to get those varieties at Indian Ladder Farm. Yeah, Randy.
Talking about snapdragons, when I visited the farm in the fall, Peter handed me an apple, and he said, here's one of a test tree, and this is 1/10 of my crop of the snapdragons.
Yeah.
And so he gave me that one snapdragon. It was a delicious apple, very, very, very good apple. Question for you, you're talking about the entertainment side of your farm and the farming of your farm is something you talked about when we walked around it. Trying to keep the growing of it at least 50% of your...
Yeah, I don't ever want to have any value-added things or other kinds of things to be the majority of what we do. I really want us to be in the farming business, growing agricultural products for people to eat. And so far we've been able to do that. But otherwise, I'm just a little guy. I'm in as many farms in the state that are 10 times the size of our farm. And they can deal with the big chain stores, but the chain stores, Jerry White, a Cornell professor, which I'm sure none of you know, he said in the distribution system of food from where it comes from until where it gets eaten, there's all kinds of steps in there, and if there's any costs or any changes in that, they'll always be transferred to the weakest link in the chain. And I've never been at a time where the person that grows it is not the weakest link in the chain. If the chain store wants to have a PLU on the side of an apple, they're not going to do that. They're going to make the guy that grew the apple do that. And so that's yeah.
Speaking about the chain, can you tell us a little bit about the community of apple growers in the Hudson Valley? What's it? Are you a loner? Are you a member of that community, and what's it like?
Well, you do have the privilege to be speaking to 50% of all the apple growers in Albany County. That's one position you can be in. At the time that they did a soil survey of Albany County, they also did an inventory of all the agriculture going on in Albany County, and that was about 1935, I think. It might have been 38. And at that time, the number of farms whose principal source of income raising fruit were 52. And there were also 250 some dairy farms. And now we have maybe a dozen dairy farms and a couple of us. It's a different dynamic, although quite frankly, when you look at all the fresh produce and stuff that's grown around the state, the American Farmland Trust has done some work on this. Something like 70 or 80% of it is all produced in the counties that have the highest urban populations. So it's all in close to where people are, which is not too good if you're going to keep having farms go out of business. Yes?
You harvest all your own apples, or do you pick it?
Yes, youth pick is a big part of our, that's where you get to pick exactly what you want, and you get a recreational experience of having done that, and we want to be in that thing where we get people come to the farm, go out on the farm, and become part of the process. Is as close to ground zero as we can get in terms of the things that we want to do. We do some wholesaling now because some of the stores, Whole Foods just moved into Albany, and they decided they want us to be their garden gnome as a local producer. So we're trying to work that out with them, so we'll probably give them some fruit. And we do a few hamburger stores that are local, but it's a break-even proposition in terms of, I mean, it's nothing I really want to do. I'd like to be able to sell all our fruit locally at the farm.
It's quite a challenge to, you must, let's say, pick a certain area, let's say, for a couple of weeks and then move to another area, or?
It's, you change at least once a week,
Yeah.
if not more than once a week, various things. And we're good at that because we have a lot of people come to the farm and they've been doing it for years. I started the pick your own operation, God knows how many years ago that was. And we've gotten to the point now where we're cheaper than a lot of the other people, and we let people do a lot of things that they can't do other places. And just because we want people to come there and have that experience, we want them to bring their kids there and be out in among the trees. Yes?
Peter, how do you get people to come? Are you on a main highway? Do you advertise, word of mouth? How do they come?
Well, we started, we got a Facebook page 2 years ago, and we put up there what we're doing here and doing there, you know, and the conversation starts. And for me to look at the fine print of the Facebook, I have to have a Facebook account myself. I don't go to it, I don't do anything with it, but somebody looked at me, and I have 2 friends and nobody likes me. So I'm not doing well in that area. But the farm, we now have 11,000 people like Indian Ladder Farms. And God knows where they all live or where they come from. And no, we're not on any main road, but we've been doing it for a lot of years, George. And we have, on a Saturday or a Sunday, we'll easily have 5, 6, 7,000 people come to the farm in one day. And you do that for like 5 Saturdays and Sundays, and that's it. But I mean, it's I don't know where they come from, but they do, and so I'm pleased. Thank you all very much.